Hello, everyone. It's Roger here on the 12th of May, following up on the self-awareness cycle of Hangouts. This is cycle, or Hangout even, number 2. With us for the first one, you'll know that self-awareness is a pretty important issue, both in your professional and your personal life. We're spending about 30 minutes just looking at different aspects of how you can improve the impact that you have, both professionally and personally, doing a little bit of introspection, going a little bit deeper than most people get the chance to do, and actually teasing out what's happening for you in your head and in your gut. So your thoughts and those processes, the things that you feel passionately right there in the heart, and the instinctive level, the gut level at which you operate. As I say, this is episode 2 of a 3-part program. In the first episode a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the basics, where you are now, and how you can tweak those changes I was talking about through a little bit of introspection and applying that self-awareness principle to make your future different and better to what it might otherwise be. The way we present ourselves, the way we come across to others, that's influenced heavily by the stories that we personally carry around with us, those that are useful to us, that tell us what our family circumstances were like, what our friendship networks have provided us, what the community we were raised in gave us, what our education provided, and more. Give us stories which are useful to us, but sometimes they can be a little bit burdensome. That in the first episode, the way that we can sometimes be carrying around excess baggage, if you will, and all of that baggage, which we sort of carry in front of us, weighs us down. It inclines us to look at our feet as opposed to the horizon, and also because our arms are full and heavily encumbered, it can get in the way of welcoming new people into our world, reaching out to other people, and making those powerful and effective new connections, which can move us forward. So that was kind of the theme that we explored in the first half hour a couple of weeks ago. Tonight, what we're going to do is delve a little bit deeper and look at those patterns that we are currently operating within, which are perhaps less than helpful, which might require a little bit of a change so that we can be much better in terms of how we show up, how we interact with others, the results that we produce for our clients or our customers or the community that we serve, and the way that we engage others in our lives as well, so that we can ask for support and get it when we need it. Now, I was looking around for some quotes. I'm a great one for quotes and stats and case studies. And I came across this wonderful one by Aristotle, which covers this theme in such a succinct way. I just want to share it with you. What he said was that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Is the beginning of all wisdom. And I suppose what he was meaning, here am I interpreting what Aristotle meant. What he was meaning was that once you're aware of what's going on for you within, it's fairly easy. Okay, I'm having a bad day because of X, or this reminds me of Y situation. Is that useful to me? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, what do I need to do about it to move forward and to change? Now, I was thinking about this in connection with one of the people whom I've supported with the coaching practice. And her story was really quite, how to describe it? It was quite rooted in the past. I think that's the way to describe it. And through the process, backwards and forwards process of teasing out what was going on for her through coaching, it became apparent that she was using some unhelpful past experience impact or affect the impact that she has here and now, and also into the future. She was raised by a traditionally minded family, and she was very much the good girl. She was very keen to please other people, to do what was necessary comfortable and to accommodate their whims and their particular desires and so forth, so that she would be perfectly able to get her team organized around her, get them productive, motivate them, inspire them, engage them. And she was a good boss. But when her boss sort of arrived from a different part of the organization for the quarterly review, it would get a little bit tense and there was a little bit of angst in the air. It turned out was that the boss from elsewhere was arriving with a very clear set of agenda points to discuss as part of the review. And there would always be a surprise issue in there, which had never been mentioned before, but was suddenly something of a point of contention or something that they could sink their teeth into and have an animated conversation about. With whom I was having the conversation, the coaching relationship, push buttons for her. And I can understand why. She was very much the good girl. She was looking to please. She'd done everything that was meant to be part of her remit, the A, B, and C. But then her boss would arrive with a D, E, and F. And it was just like, where's this come from and what's this about? So where she would be applying 100% or more of her energies on getting it right, she of course couldn't achieve rightness in terms of what her manager was looking for, because the manager had a hidden agenda. And that's the nucleus of the conversation for this evening. Agendas, the way we present ourselves, the way we interact, the things we ask for in terms of support, and the support that we offer as well. It's all very good if we've got a very clear sense of where we're coming from, and we share that as widely as possible with others. So there are no hidden surprises. There's no ambush with that management meeting or quarterly review. Everything is above board. Everybody knows where everyone else is operating from. And there's no areas that are mysterious or unknowable up and become a problem. So I was going to ask you the question. It's a rhetorical question in one way of looking at it, but it's actually a practical one in another. How do others see you if you hold something back? Maybe it's something to review when the recording finishes. Come back with a piece of paper and a pen. But how do others see you if you hold something back? Very much a professional in your personal dealings with others, above board, everything's consistently stated, and you're very clear about where you're coming from. The people in your world will have one particular perception of you. Oh, that person's professional. There's no areas that are off limits. We can have a full and frank conversation as necessary. But if you're holding something back, if there's something that's really important to you, the key to opening up that relationship and making it more productive, making it more empathic and function better, I think. I remember when I was inducted into a new team, one that I had no experience of, no real knowledge of the work there, the very first thing the senior manager and the team did was to sit me down over a coffee and explain where he was coming from, what his home life was like, how that impacted on the work that he was undertaking personally, attitudes and values that he found useful in the way he led the team, and also the way he wanted the team to function. Being cards on the table, he sort of let me see him in a 360-degree way. And then he invited me to say the same, to explain what home life was like, what experiences I'd had from the previous job, what I hoped to bring to this particular job, the sort of values that I held as important, and how I served other people, our customers, our clients. It struck me about that particular approach very powerful, because I'd never had that kind of and frank conversation with a new manager before. And two, I really felt understood. And equally, I understood where the boss, the big boss as he was coming from, which was invaluable. There was no mystery about what was expected, and he was approachable about that. The interesting thing about that particular interaction and that welcome to the new team, a couple of months later, we both happened to be, Big Boss and myself, both happened to be at the printer waiting for our papers to come out at the end. And he just asked me a question about something I'd mentioned at that very first encounter, just something casual about a social thing that I was doing back then. And I was just like, wow, that's pretty cool. He'd remembered what I'd said, and he'd brought it up at a relevant point in time. So how he came across was really quite high. He was one of the better managers and leaders that I've come across, period. Because he was aware of his own impact. Leader, he set the tone for the team. His friendliness, his approachability, his professionalism, and just remembering how people bring themselves, their whole selves to work. And yes, of course, they're doing their very best job-wise, but they have a life outside of that. And by valuing that and remembering that and checking in with me, I just felt this is the team that I want to be in. This is someplace that I'd like to spend some time in and contribute to, which I did. I was there for a number of years. So if there are things that are impacting your performance or your wider life, stuff that's happening at home, perhaps caring responsibilities that you're trying to discharge, or just something that's affecting you, are you able to share that with the people around you who are important to you so that they can give you a little bit of slack, make allowances for the fact that you're focused on that home thing? And that might very well affect the way that you show up and present yourself work-wise. If the answer's no, I can't actually bring these topics to bear, but you're fully aware of them and their impact for you internally, see you if suddenly things get a little bit disrupted, if your usual level of friendliness and approachability declines, or if your work product just goes into a bit of a tailspin, if they don't know what's going on for you, although you are self-aware of it, too, it's a sharing thing. And if you find yourself in an environment where you can't bring your whole self to work, all of those issues that are pertinent and important are not welcome there. Maybe that's telling you something about the environment in which you work and its suitability in the long term for your welfare. Because if your supervisor, your big boss, your manager can see clearly who you are, isn't it more likely that she or he is going to be in a position to support you when you ask for a little flexibility in terms of the hours that you work? Or could you maybe just take a little personal time during the day to attend to whatever the big issue is operating in your personal life? It's more likely, I think, that you'll get a yes on those answers if you are fully understood to begin with, and so that anything that's happening to disrupt your usual ability to be an effective and professional person, full on the table, cards on the table sort of approach. If it's coming out of the blue, or if, worst case scenario, it's not welcome in the team that you find yourself in, that could really be a problem. Because clearly, if you're usually performing at a high level, into that can begin to it can obviously begin to affect your own sense of self. You're used to being full of the joys of being, big smile on your face, energetic, connected to other people, providing good service, and then whatever the personal issue is affects you, outputs a little bit, and that's disruptive. If you are in that position for long enough, if you begin to be, I don't know, sleepless because you can't figure out your money problems, your health problems, your caring responsibilities, whatever it is, that has an impact on how you show up and perform. And equally, it's a kind of a vicious circle. The longer you're under par, the longer you underperform, the longer your usual way of being is disruptive, or disrupted even, that obviously it reflects itself in a deterioration. And ultimately, it can lead to quite serious outcomes, things like depression. If you're anxious and stressed, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating a reasonable diet, taking some exercise, having a good time in your downtime with your friends and your family, cool, potentially. And it begins to have a very negative effect on you. And that's really, that's just not good. So checking in with yourself, using that self-awareness process that I outlined in the first video, that's paying all kinds of dividends should you find yourself in that situation which begins to be a little bit turbulent. As I was saying, the client whom I was coaching, who had that performance issue with her big boss, once we were able to establish that she was perhaps being a little bit over-invested in a pattern of behaviors and thoughts which weren't helping her, we took some of the heat out of that relationship. The client was able to do the very best that she could do and recognize that because the boss had a particular approach to the world which was not helpful, there was no way that the boss was ever going to be 100% happy with the outcomes that the client was providing. So the client needed to just recognize it was okay to do her very best, but recognize equally that that very best would never fully satisfy her boss because her boss had a different way of looking at the world. So it was a case of client does this, boss does something higher and altogether more exacting. Nothing that you can do ultimately to please all of the people all of the time. But if you're operating from a place that is self-aware and self-confident, a place that is adequately supported by the people who are important to you, in which you can offer support to others, well then, it begins to be relatively straightforward to have a good day. Even if somebody comes along who spoils it or has a negative impact, you know that overall, shot, and that when you go home, you will have enough energy to spend time with the people who are important to you, to perhaps give something back to the community that you are a part of or that you wish to serve, and you'll have time to eat well and sleep well and get enough water down your neck, the life with your friends, or take some exercise or have a laugh, whatever ultimately nourishes that inner self, so that your awareness, your energy, the way you apply yourself, those are all maintained or actually get to improve a little bit because you're doing what's necessary to sustain yourself in the long term. So let's just go back a second. I was talking about the situation. I hope that it doesn't apply to anyone who's listening, but you find yourself around a square peg in a round hole, rather. I know from my own experience, it feels awful. It can really chafe. And if you're in tune, if you're doing the things that I mentioned before, checking in with yourself, how does this feel? In my heart, does this feel like the right situation to be in? Am I giving myself the best opportunity to give service to clients and customers, to connect really well in a fun way, and to go home at the end of the day feeling I've got some energy left and I can now spend time with family, friends, and the ones I love? The case, any reason, and you've done your checks and you know that this is a genuine thing, it's not just a blip, but it's seemingly a trend month to month or quarter to quarter, you're in a very powerful position if you've got the self-awareness thing going on to determine. In fact, I was looking at a model earlier on of, well, it's like the crossroads, isn't it, really? You've come to the fork in the road. You can either accept the situation. This isn't the right thing for me. I know it's in my head that it isn't. My heart isn't in it. My gut instinct tells me definitely not. Because, well, you have your own reasons and that's fine. Or You could resist the situation. You can identify specifically what isn't working. Back to the scenario I set out, where the client and her boss just didn't have a meeting of minds. The client could, of course, have sat down with the boss and said, there's something going on between us, and I think it's X versus my performance. What are we going to do about it? And that's one way of resisting a situation that just doesn't feel right. It depends on your knowledge of the dynamics of the relationship. It may be that your team has a climate, and always has, in which people can speak their minds in a very constructive way. Just say, this seems not to be working, and the impact of this not working is that serving my clients as well as I wanted to. The connections and relationships within the team, they're less productive than they should be. And I also feel a bit frustrated and so forth. Brilliant if you're in the team where that is the case, because that makes it entirely possible for you to thrive and to be as productive and as, ultimately geared towards great results as anyone could possibly be. Fantastic position to be in. If you find yourself not able to accept that difficult situation, and the climate in which the team operates just doesn't allow for those open, honest, constructive conversations to take place, well, you're going to have to avoid the situation entirely. What's happened to put you in that situation, you can't really do very much about. Perhaps the big boss doesn't listen, doesn't have those open dialogues, that honest communication. It says one set of values prevail, when in fact an entirely different set of values are applied. Whatever is the truth of it, if you can't accept the situation and you can't push back or resist against it, you probably need to look at strategies for avoiding it entirely. So you'd be looking for the exits. What can you do with the skills and talents and potential that you have to turn the situation in a new direction outside of this team, whatever reason, just isn't working for you? And again, that's about having the confidence, being self-possessed enough and self-aware enough to know that that is the next thing that needs to happen. Wouldn't it be great if every team was open in its dialogues, constructive in the way that it approached challenges, and prepared to change and be flexible? In fact, it hit a bit of turbulence, or met a point that just the usual outputs, the usual atmosphere just took a dip. Not every team is like that. And as I say, if you find yourself in a place where that isn't the case, and you've done your legitimate self-checks, that self-awareness, what's happening for me as far as my thoughts are concerned and the way I usually function, in my heart, is my heart really in this? It's my gut instinct about the future. Is it going to be like this next month, next quarter, next year? And what's the impact on me if I stay, as opposed to if I make a logical and customer serving, ultimately, decision to move on? My confidence, my potential, and apply them somewhere else within the organization or externally. Again, because I'm very much oriented around case studies and quotes and so forth, let me share a quote from Sigmund Freud, which seems really to slot into this situation perfectly. It's this: that being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise. Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise. And you can only do that, it seems to me, if you've got all of those facts about yourself in place, and it's very clear where you're operating from. You know what you plan to be doing at this point in your career, And it's very simple and straightforward, therefore, for you to get engaged of managing your own life. Yes, you could be a good girl, classically trying to please everybody else, or equally, you could be one of the good guys who is selfless and reliable, and you always can trust that individual to turn up and do that extra bit of work, or stay late, or to time to carry things through. Nothing wrong, nothing wrong with being a good guy or a good girl. If it doesn't, if it doesn't feel right, if you do your self-awareness checks and there's just something that tells you, no, this isn't really where I want to be right now, and this isn't what I want to be doing, then, of course, it's an opportunity for you to take that fork in the road, that you're not going to accept it, and you recognize that you can't resist it. There's nothing that you can do to push back against it, to have those open dialogues about, could we maybe change this, or the impact on our clients and customers is so and so, but if we did something different, it would be better. If those aren't acceptance or resistance, then that's where the avoidance comes into play. And there's nothing wrong in that. It's you looking after yourself, making sure that you're able to show up with as much energy, with as much dynamism, call it what you will, and serve your customers or clients, to provide them with the really good stuff, the stuff that reflects well on the organization as a whole, just in the way that it supports you as somebody who works within it. It reflects well, obviously, on the team, a member, or if you're a team leader, it definitely reflects well on you. It gives you back, you put in, and then some, because you are taking care of yourself, taking care of your health, your well-being, professional, and bringing all those fantastic qualities, all that extra wonderful stuff that makes you unique, powerful, and very, very much an asset to any organization, any team, any endeavor that you put your mind to. I'm arguing that self-awareness is one of the keys, a pretty important one, to make that a reality. So we've had an interjection from Aristotle about knowing yourself being the beginning of wisdom. It's reminded us that being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise. And I think both of threads are pretty important for you to develop and strengthen your self-awareness qualities, those things that are going to make you a self-awareness superstar ultimately. Bear in mind, of course, that now we live and operate in a climate where nothing's fixed. Past, it was the case, you'd start a job at 20, say, and you'd finish at 60, and you could pretty much be guaranteed how things would go. Quicker, much more dynamic, much more fluid. So the greater degree of self-awareness you can bring to your situation, the greater the degree of self-awareness you can apply whenever you are reviewing your own progress, never mind having your progress reviewed by a supervisor or a manager or whatever. The greater the role self-awareness plays in your life, I think, the better. Because that equips you not just for today, but tomorrow and 6 months' time and further. You know where you are, you know what you expected to be doing, and if there's any discontinuity between one and the other, if there's any resistance, if the flow is interrupted to any degree, you know you have 3 options at the very least. There's probably more, but let's focus in on 3. You can accept what's happening, you can resist what's happening, or you can avoid what's happening. And each is a legitimate choice. It depends on circumstances. You might have to accept things until you can financially or in career terms make a move. Be in a position where you can resist them if the culture of your team or your organization supports you saying, this isn't working, and I think constructively we could do something better, and it's this. You might simply have to bide your time and avoid the situation by doing practical things, updating your resume, your CV, refreshing your network connections, making sure that LinkedIn is working for you, or if there is a physical network that you're a part of, making sure you're connected to it, you're out and about, you're letting people know that you can be of service in different contexts because you have a great range of skills, a great offer, and a great backstory, which is something that you're tuned into. By being much more present outside of the team in which you find yourself, you can exploit opportunities that come up, perhaps even create them. Let people know in the area that you'd like to work that, yeah, you've got the potential to be part of their world coming up soon. All of this is part and parcel of self-awareness. It's a bigger canvas, I agree. And certainly if you've seen the first of these Hangouts, you know we started fairly small, quite a lot bigger. The second of three Hangouts draws to a close, it gives you the opportunity to do a little work. I'd certainly suggest reviewing what I've been talking about for the past 30 minutes, pausing it where relevant, piece of paper and a pen, always good tools to have, and answer that fundamental question I posed about a third of the way through our time together. How will others see you if you hold back something that's key to your performance right now? How will others see you if you hold back on something that's key to your performance right now? That's an important one. It's, again, tied up intricately, intimately even, with self-awareness. Hopefully it gives you something around which to work over the next couple of weeks, because in a couple of weeks' time, third of the Hangouts, the concluding part of this trilogy, we'll look at pulling all these threads together from the basics about head, heart, and gut, finding out what's happening inside of you. We'll look at the key points from this evening, which has been around how do you apply that knowledge when it comes to accepting, resisting, or avoiding a difficult situation. And the third part will take us even further, make you a bit of a self-awareness superstar. How can you put this thinking into everyday practice so that you're mindful of what's happening within exactly where you are in terms of your bigger plan, the bigger game that you're looking to play? If necessary, you can plot your next steps and how to take them. You're entitled to seek out to make that progress possible. So, I'm Roger. Thank you very much for listening to part 2 of a 3-part series on self-awareness. And look out for the third part of the trilogy, which I'll be posting up fairly soon. And obviously, if you've got comments, what works for you particularly well in terms of self-awareness and the bigger game that you play, use the comment section below to let me know exactly where you're coming from. Or you could always tweet at me. I'm at RogerD_Said, S-A-I-D. Otherwise, I look forward to sharing some time with you in a fortnight's time. In the meantime, make sure you answer that question about what's holding you back. And in 2 weeks' time, we'll get together, do it all again, and go a little bit deeper so that you are on track to become a self-awareness superstar. Good night.